How's it going, guys? You're listening to Sports Talk with Mike and Chad.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Chad. So, me and Mike, we were reading the Yahoo Sports article, which will be linked in the description. And this article was a fantasy-type article in which all players in the NFL were in fact teamless. Then, with the 2012 NFL draft order, they were being drafted. All players, even current college athletes, are eligible. So, on to the list. Let's get right into this, Mike. Number 1, with the first pick in the 2012 NFL Draft, the Indianapolis Colts are going to select Aaron Rodgers. Do you agree with that pick, Mike?
I think it's a perfect pick just because establishing a franchise itself after losing Peyton Manning and all that stuff.
Very simple pick. Best quarterback in the league, most valuable position in the league. I agree with that pick. That's a no-brainer. Aaron Rodgers was by far the best quarterback in the league this year. Look at his passing numbers. They were historic. Great pick by the Colts. So we're just going to move right on to number 2 because number 1 was a no-brainer. Number 2, the St. Louis Rams have the pick in this article, but in fact they actually traded out of this position. So a little out of date. I believe the Redskins.
Yeah, the Redskins ended up trading for a lot of first-round draft picks. But the way this article goes is it's going based on how the draft was initially based on standings.
So initially, the Rams had the second pick in the draft, and here this article is going to show them drafting Cam Newton. And I don't know about that as a pick. I mean, he is very young. He is very good. So you got the youth.
He also broke a couple of records last year.
He did have 14 rushing touchdowns last year, which is pretty insane. He had really good passing numbers, threw for a lot of yards, made Steve Smith look like he was 22 again. I don't fully agree with that pick. What about you?
I think it would be a decent enough pick if they could build around him. Obviously, this is only first round that we're reviewing, but overall, I think if they could build around Cam Newton's play style, definitely a worthwhile pick.
Yeah, I mean, it is a decent pick.
It's not the best pick.
But going by my formula again, most valuable position is quarterback, so it does fit there. But I would have went with a better quarterback. Or a quarterback who's been playing better at that position, like a Brady or a Breeze.
Yeah, there's definitely every other quarterback available other than Rodgers. So there's Brady, Manning.
Breeze, Manning. Manning would even be a better pick in my mind. But Cam Newton's not that bad of a pick, so I'll let that one slide here.
I think the basis of why they projected Cam Newton would be picked is because Jeff Fisher had Steve McNair back in his prime of coaching. So I believe that was the reason.
On to pick number 3, the Minnesota Vikings. I know a lot about the Minnesota Vikings because my best friend is a big Vikings fan, and they haven't had a quarterback in a while.
Who was the last good quarterback?
I don't include Brett Favre. He just jumped over there and all that shit.
Donovan McNabb.
Yeah, that's.
Who was the last good quarterback that was there? Anyway?
Last quarterback for the Vikings was Culpepper until he started sucking. Randall Cunningham was a good quarterback.
All right, so on to the projected pick.
It's another quarterback, obviously. Tom Brady. Tom Brady above Drew Brees here. I like the pick. Tom Brady will be 35 next season, as it says, but I don't know. I might have taken Breeze. 35 is a little old, especially in the NFL. He can't be playing for too much longer. I don't know. It's a pretty good pick, though. A pretty solid pick.
It would definitely, provide, a little bit of, an audience. Minnesota hasn't exactly had, the fan base it should at this point in its career. The only worthwhile player that it's had in a long time has been Adrian Peterson and Jared Allen at this point.
But you also got to think, you can't really argue with a pick when you're taking a guy who's probably top 5 ever to play the game at his position.
This is all true.
But you also have to think he's never done it without a really fitting system for him. The Vikings personnel hasn't been too great in the last few years. And with Leslie Frazier as a defensive-minded head coach, I don't really know how him and Brady would get along as compared to Brady and Belichick. So I don't know how he would fit. Not really sure.
So I guess the real question is, would Bill Belichick's system work for any quarterback, or is it really Brady who's fueling the success?
I'm a big believer in the system. Look at Matt Castle. Belichick made Matt Castle a multi-millionaire.
Yep.
Multi-millionaire. Matt Castle didn't play a game since high school when he played that year when Brady got hurt, and he looked like one of the best in the league. It was pretty crazy. So that makes me believe in more of a system-based success in the NFL. Let's move on to pick 4. We've been on pick 3 for a little bit. The Cleveland Browns here are
Drew
also going to take another
Brees.
quarterback. 4 quarterbacks to start the board, but quarterback is very important. Drew Brees. What do you think about that?
Definitely a great pick. He pretty much revolutionized New Orleans and turned that whole city around itself. So Cleveland definitely needs a turnaround. Hasn't really had the presence in the NFL that it used to.
I agree. I agree. Drew Brees is a great quarterback. He really, midway throughout his career, matured into one of the best quarterbacks in the league. If it weren't for like a Brady or a Rodgers coming out the way they did, he might be the best quarterback in the league right now. He just broke the yards record, which is pretty crazy. That
Broke Dan
record's
Marino's
took forever.
passing yard record.
But I mean, everyone's throwing for a lot of yards now. Yards numbers are inflated, not like what they used to be.
The
It's
other
like the
thing to
steroid era,
consider,
but for yards.
the other thing to consider is that Brady also broke the Dan Marino's old record, but he didn't surpass Breeze. So interesting
Yeah.
that Brady went ahead of Breeze at that
Yeah,
point.
there were 3 5,000-yard passers. Trivia, do you know the third this year?
Stafford.
It was Stafford. Very good, Mike. Very good. On to number 5. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to go against the curve here, and they're going to go with the defensive end. And they're going to go with probably the defensive end who played the best last year, especially when it mattered. And surprisingly, he didn't even start the whole year. It's someone from your favorite team. So you want to tell the people who it is?
Jason Pierre-Paul, JPP.
Who's down with JPP? Well, you know, the Buccaneers are down with JPP. I like the pick. If you're not going to take a quarterback, you're going to take someone who's going to make other quarterbacks miserable. Pick is a good pick. I agree with Tampa. They've always been more of a defensive-minded organization. Even when they won the Super Bowl in 2002, they had Brad Johnson as his quarterback, which I don't think you can win a Super Bowl nowadays with Brad Johnson. What do you think?
I personally love Jason Pierre-Paul's style of play. He's just got the body of an insane athlete, and it's really hard to just stop him. You would need to build an amazing offensive line just to make sure he's contained, and just a whole game plan could be centered around stopping him, and that really takes away from any offense.
I agree. It's pretty much I can't really argue with that pick. But on to number 6, the Washington Redskins. We're going to take a quarterback who hasn't even played a year in the NFL. He's going to be drafted this year realistically by the Redskins, ironically, at number 2 in the draft. But they're going to take Robert Griffin III out of Baylor. What do you think about that pick? I'm not a big fan of this pick at all, actually.
He hasn't proven anything yet, but if we learned anything from Cam Newton's production last year, it's that college players, especially quarterbacks, have been coming out of college ready to go and have been doing some amazing things, and I think Cam Newton's a perfect example.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really argue with what you just said, but Cam Newton, before Cam Newton, name a quarterback who really had a lot of success in the NFL that was just I don't want to say he's a primarily run-based
Well,
quarterback.
the only one I could think of is Michael Vick. He's the most
But he
prevalent
really,
running.
success, I don't think he's ever made it past when he was on the Falcons, I don't think he ever made it out of the second round, maybe, in the playoffs. I don't think he ever made it to the championship game.
That is
Or-
true. The only issue with depending on a rushing quarterback like Griffin or Vick or Newton is that if you lose him, you basically lose your whole team. The
Yeah,
whole team
and
goes downhill.
they're really on path to get injured with the way they play. Robert Griffin is pretty built, but I don't know. I mean, he was a good thrower in college, but college is a lot different than the pros. I don't know how his throwing style is going to really translate to the pros, but I can think of a few more quarterbacks I'd rather have on my team over Robert Griffin III, and I really don't agree with that pick at all.
Well,
Yeah.
under Mike Shanahan, who was able to lead John Elway to 2 Super Bowls, we'll see. John Elway was kind of a running quarterback. He could throw from the pocket like Griffin, and he could also run like Griffin. Not as fast, obviously, but some similar traits. So maybe Mike Shanahan could duplicate the success.
He didn't do it with Donovan McNabb.
Donovan McNabb wasn't exactly, ready to go.
I don't know. Not
Well,
big
we'll
of a
see.
fan of Mike Shanahan. I know he did a lot with the Broncos, but I don't know. He's made some questionable decisions as
Moving on to number
the coach of
7.
the Redskins. Yeah, we were on number 6 for a while. Moving on to number 7, and Ndamukong Suh, defensive tackle.
And what do you think?
Not a big fan of the pick. First of all, it's defensive tackle. I don't know. I'm not a big fan. Defensive tackle, in my opinion, they don't get many sacks. They do pressure the quarterback sometimes, but they don't get many sacks. So they're not really at the quarterback too much. They do push the line back. I don't know. I think the game's more of a pass-happy game now, and I feel like ends are more important. And if you are going to take a tackle, don't take a tackle who is very unsportsmanlike and can get suspended at any moment, and makes very questionable decisions. I don't like the pick. What about you?
Jacksonville, could use a pretty polarizing player, I guess. They've been nowhere ever since their existence.
Yeah,
After losing
player,
Tom Coughlin, they've pretty much gone downhill.
Polarizing player like that?
Anything.
He's
It just looks like
in a negative direction.
This is true, but it still gets headlines and stuff. And just honestly, he's still a good player regardless of his attitude toward the game.
He's the best at his position. Arguably, actually, Haloti Ngata might be
he's
just
up there
as
with Haloti Ngata. I guess Vince Wilfork had an amazing year last year, but that's another discussion.
I know what he did on Thanksgiving was just disgusting. He just, especially considering it's Thanksgiving that he did it on. I mean, I don't know. Just I'm not a big fan of Ndamukong Suh. Moving on to number 8, the Miami Dolphins. I'm going to announce who they picked because he is undoubtedly my favorite player in the NFL. That's Darrelle Revis. Obviously, I'm not going to hate on the decision considering he's my favorite player. What Darrelle Revis does for you, he's not just a cornerback. He is a cornerback, but he does a lot of things for you. He's shut down. He can play one-on-one with essentially any wide receiver in the league. When he's on top of his game, he does have some bad games, once in a while, like that game against Stevie Johnson. Stevie Johnson does seem to get in his head. It seems like he's the only wide receiver in the league that seems to get in Revis' head. But what Revis does is he can man up on anyone, take them out of the game, and that essentially allows for a linebacker to just be able to blitz the whole game. It gives you another man on defense that you're able to rush the quarterback with. So he's very, very valuable. Revis Island. What do you think?
I will definitely agree that he is among the best, and he's definitely surpassed Champ Bailey at this point in his career. Actually, surpassed him a while ago. But as for both of them, they only stop one player, and that's really an issue because you really want a player that could affect more of the game than just one person. So quarterback obviously affects the entire team, offense and defense.
Well, I don't know. It allows more of a pass rush.
This is true, because if you're confident that he could stop that one person, then you can make sure that all the other receivers are covered. And, the second best receiver can get double covered if necessary.
You brought up Champ Bailey. I just want to say I believe that in Champ Bailey's prime, Revis was still a better lockdown corner. I feel like the only one who really compares to Revis as a lockdown corner in their prime was Prime Time. Prime Time was the best. Revis, if he's second at being a lockdown corner, it's to him. I'm not going to say he was a better cornerback than Bailey because Bailey was probably a better quarterback in his prime. But lockdown, one-on-one, Revis was probably only second to maybe Prime Time.
Well, both Bailey and Revis have a very good chance at hitting the Hall of Fame, I think, in my opinion. The way their careers are
Bailey's undoubtedly a Hall of Famer. Revis is too early in his career, but if he continues
the way he's progressing.
Which is kind of interesting because Revis doesn't have the numbers because he really doesn't get the ball thrown to him at all. He's that locked down. So it's kind of interesting to see how they'd evaluate him in a Hall of Fame debate. So I don't know. I find that quite interesting. I'd want to be like a fly on the wall in that discussion.